This week's episode is going to be a look back on the advent of 3D and its effects on the consoles. And I don't think I've seen too many of these videos on YouTube. You can definitely get specs and the progression of consoles on YouTube, I'm sure. This one, however, is going to be more about what I've noticed and the rendering changes along each console. So the implications of technology in the background of the hardware progression. So I prepared this little timeline here, and I'm just using PlayStation as PlayStation really ushered in 3D along with many other things. But they've actually got a really great history as to how they got started with consoles. If you were to look into it, PlayStation 1, the guys at Sony really pushed for rendering triangles and 3D, and that's the thing that got everything kickstarted. That particular console generation is known as the 5th generation. I'll just cycle through these slides that I've prepared. 1996, Crash Bandicoot comes out. There are a lot of articles about this game and how pivotal it was for video games. Along with 3D, PlayStation brought in the compact disc era. So games went from less than 10 megabytes to 700 megabytes. It was night and day. And the competitor to the PlayStation at the time, the Nintendo 64, it just couldn't compete in terms of storage capacity. You had cartridges, which were a much more expensive medium, competing with compact discs, which were orders of magnitude cheaper. And they delivered way more content. Along with Crash Bandicoot, brought in the whole streaming of content. So you actually had a certain memory pool in your hard drive, and you could actually, as you were progressing through the level, load additional content. Loading on a compact disc was a thing that people had to get used to, going from cartridges. Yeah, the amount of content was the game changer. It really made PlayStation shine. They were basically unchallenged in that area. So Shrek is... I didn't realize this until some years back. So there's a thing called deferred rendering, and it is the practice of rendering each sort of pass into the frame buffer, I believe. And what you can do is, much like in cinema where you would, not cinema, but when you would offline render passes and then composite everything together, it would act very similarly. I just read some articles that Shrek was actually the first commercial game to do this. This was on the Xbox. And yeah, this was really big. Deferred rendering is still the way to go about making games. Forward rendering has become less of a thing. It's more of a thing with VR. But deferred rendering started here and is continuing to progress. Deferred rendering in itself is a whole is a huge topic. So I won't be touching on that. I will just be mentioning that Shrek was the start of it all, and it's really become something else since then. Every major game today will use some form of deferred rendering. Gears of War was huge in terms of the art production. If you read into normal maps for video games, normal maps were around, I believe, like the concept for them existed in the 70s. So the 70s had the concept of normal maps, and I believe in the 90s, Cornell or some university wrote papers on how to achieve it. And Gears of War, to me, is the game that executed it really well. Gears of War, of course, is an Unreal Engine game. 2006, and around this time was the era of, if you wanted to license Unreal Engine, you'd have to fork out $1 million. It's quite surreal to think that now, where Unreal Engine is free and available for anyone to try, but back then it was premium product. Gears of War came out being the poster child of Unreal Engine, and it was gorgeous. Every other game, if you were to look around 2006, looked like a completely different thing in comparison. And on top of Gears of War looking great, they actually had fantastic art direction, and the gameplay was pretty decent as well. This was actually an Xbox title. It was basically the mascot of the Xbox 360. To me, I would attribute Gears of War to the early successes of the 360. Alright, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare 2007. This is such a landmark title to me and the industry. Jeez, it was huge. This game, it's the game that brought all these legal cases around Vince Zampella and Activision Blizzard. This one game was responsible for the brown desaturated tones that would later come from it. Like, that color palette Modern Warfare had lasted a decade after this game. It changed everything. Along with Modern Warfare and the 360, you would see certain camera tricks done around deferred rendering. So God rays were a thing that were very prominent in the 360 era of games. So you would have God rays. Depth of field was very much a thing. A lot of these camera tricks that we would see in cinema were now making its way to video games. And Call of Duty, for me, was that era. It was very much around, Gears of War, Call of Duty, and then the following decade that very much carried that. So games kind of coasted for a little bit, refining itself. Art production would get better, normal maps were in. The Order 1886 was huge in terms of physically based rendering. PBR is now the modern texturing standard. If you were to look into the development of the Order 1886, this is where a lot of the pipeline was established. And a lot of the artists that worked on this game went on to work at Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica, very, very big and established studios. And the pipeline that they figured out here was very much what was adapted and used at these other larger studios. It's a little different now because that workflow, along with modern packages like Substance Painter and Substance Designer, have become the standard in authoring assets. But back in 2015, it wasn't that way. Early packages that would allow you to do this were very fringe kind of assets. I'm thinking like Dido and Endo. The whole PBR pipeline just was not a thing like it is today. And the Order 1886, these guys were very much pioneers. The best in class artists making a game. So what you want about the video game? Like, the video game is another thing, but if you look at it in terms of like art production, it is hands down still fantastic. And to think it came out in 2015 as a full game that ran on a console, it's quite mind-blowing. And of course, Battlefield V. Battlefield 5. After some Googling about the first ray trace games, Battlefield 5 will come in. I think they were the first game to sort of like support ray tracing. Ray tracing is very much the topic du jour right now. 2018 is when this game came out. If you were to ask me what demonstrates ray tracing best as one of the early titles, I would have to say Control. That game was, it's another masterclass in terms of, how to make assets, how to make a game, and how to really evoke emotion just through set design and art direction. It just has a lot of that. Control, obviously Remedy's game, and yeah, they're definitely no strangers to making fantastic video games. So yeah, just a quick look back on it. Shrek ushering in deferred rendering, the Order 1886 coming in with PBR. I don't think they're the first PBR game, but they are definitely the ones that did it well and best to me. And then Unreal with their real-time ray tracing demo in 2018, and the latest gen consoles in 2020 being the ones that will try to support some form of ray tracing, but are still very much heavily deferred rendering first and ray tracing to complement that kind of rendering. So I've just prepared this slide to wrap up. We've got PlayStation 1 with the compact disc era, larger games, movie and audio. PS2, larger games again, refined 3D, and we started seeing GPUs coming in. These were pretty low-end GPUs, it's 2001, but that's the state of it. PlayStation 3, better GPUs, larger games again, starting to support high definition, network gaming. PlayStation 4, start seeing 4K gaming. PlayStation 4 was interesting because they had the two consoles. You had your Pro versions as well. I'm sure we'll see something similar for PlayStation 5. There's a typo there. Refined network gaming, so the software became a little better for streaming and all that kind of stuff. Things that I don't care about. Larger games. PS5 is very much a refined version of everything that preceded it, with the reworked solid state. The implications of the solid state hard drive are huge for video games because there hasn't been a push like this previously. Storage media has always been the bottleneck. I'm really excited to see what the implications of having a very quick hard drive are. Nanite requires a solid state. PlayStation 5 is touted to have the largest the quickest storage device. So I'm unsure what that looks like. You've seen demos. I've definitely seen demos on YouTube about this, comparing Spider-Man and certain levels loading off the PS4 and then again on PlayStation 5, and it's not even a competition. I'm really interested to see what future titles look like, especially future AAA titles, large scale titles. It should be really cool. I think that topic in itself warrants its own video. That was a look back onto the consoles from things that interest me. Anyway, that's it for this week.